Okay, it says I'm live. Hi, you guys. This is CS Queen, and I'm just going to read another section. If you haven't read or seen the intro video and all that, it's just me reading to myself on a book that I've been writing so I can check the flow, the grammar, and all that. I do write creatively, and then I check everything with Grammarly, and then I just kind of read it to myself here. Anybody joining, just be aware that I'm going to be sharing my screen and I will be looking at the document that I am reading from. So I will not be able to see the chat until I click back over to the chat, the StreamYard screen, if that makes any sense. So I want to share screen. Yes. Entire screen. Yes. That one, boy, it takes a long process to get everything sharing. Okay, so here we are supposedly sharing, but I don't see it on the demo scene. But hopefully that's working. StreamYard's changed some things. There's like it looks like you can have two different scenes going on at once. I don't know. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and check one more thing real quick. Um, So I am skipping far ahead. The first chapter that I read, and I think I read two in my last video, was kind of early on. So there's like, I separated my book into several sections. You know what? I'll just show you. That way you have something to look at instead of hearing me ramble here. Hopefully you're seeing this. This is my save center, and this is my book. Okay, so Catal is the land where this whole story takes place. And then there are outsiders that appear in the land. And then the outsiders appear in the land that is outside in. I named it book 1, 2, 3, and 4 is Convergence. And then this is my character notes, which I'm not going to share. But Convergence is kind of where we're going. We are skipping books 1, 2, 3, and we're going straight to 4. These are not all these. I don't call these chapters because some of them are only 2 pages. And so I might combine, I call them sections. So I have section 1, looks like I'm missing a 2. Okay, I got to fix that. But this one introduces a character called a Mimica. He is a Portuguese man who is kind of an assassin, and then you learn a little bit more about him. But in this first one, I'll read some other time. Section 1, he is essentially hired by the king and queen, King Oron and Queen Ekatina, to go and find the outsiders, because according to Queen Ekatina, she knows that the outsiders have kind of an impending effect on Catal, and Oron is fearful that the effect is that these outsiders were sent here to hunt down and kill Ekatina, which he does not want to have happen. So that's what's happening. And it does look like I am showing that I am live on my YouTube channel. So I will move forward. I have already opened up the document that I want to read. So there are characters, just a quick overhead. There are two characters named Jivanta and Varun Anand. They are of Hindu descent, or Indian descent, and they are from Seattle, Washington. They are Americans, but Jivanta moved to America and became a citizen years ago. Varun was born and raised in Seattle. And then there's another character who had also appeared in Catal, another outsider. Her name is Gray Arvidley. Gray is from the Czech Republic. Her English is going to be kind of choppy and very heavily influenced with the Chechen accent. And then, of course, there is a Mimica. A Mimica we will not disclose. Now, I'm going to patent this with, I started this chapter, I wrote it differently, and then I changed it, and it's much longer now. A Mimica is a character who is not an outsider that we know of. He did not appear at Catal like Jivanta, Varun, and Gray, but he knows. We'll read it. You tell me what you think. So this is happening at the Great River, Maine, in Catal. If you need to see the map and you go to the posts on this YouTube channel, you'll see a map of Catal. And Great River, Maine is the thick river that comes from the ocean, heads east, and then splits into two. The area where I want this to happen is at the split on the Tamian side where the forest is, and they are on the shore. So, if you're looking at the map, Varun and Jivanta appeared several days ago on the shore at one of the fishing village along the oceans. They escaped because they realized they were not fitting in with these people. Something is wrong. They don't know what this world is. And the last thing you knew, they were running from a fishing village after they appeared, which caused an explosion, and they were trying to slip away unnoticed. Okay, so a dome of water began to rise from the shallows along the Tamian shore where the Great River Main splits. The water churned upward and swirled around the outside of an air bubble that broke the surface. An opening began to part at the top, and Varun peeked his head out to look around. He scanned the horizons along the shores of Tamia and was relieved to see that nobody was around. I think I'm going to change that because we have the word around redundantly here. This is why I like to read it out loud. So nobody, let's say, was in sight. Okay. It looks clear, he whispered. I can't see, Jivanta's voice rasped from inside the bubble. Varun let out a giggle when he remembered that his mother was too short to see above the water's edge. He and Jivanta had been riding against the current of the Great River Main for a day and a half. After their initial encounter with the fishing village, Jivanta was adamant that they had to stay out of sight. She was convinced that they had somehow gone back in time and that the man Varun saved was a Roman soldier. After they ran away from that fishing village, Varun observed the next two villages they passed and wondered if she was right. I might redo that verbiage because it is kind of cumbersome to say or read. They didn't know what to do next and no idea where to go for help. I have a terrible habit of putting thoughts together in compound sentences with the ands. I never leave well enough alone. So when I write something like they didn't know what to do next, I always put and I want to emphasize it a little more. So I'm thinking about taking this off. They didn't know what to do next and had no idea where to go for help. So which idea is more important? I want to take one of these out. So Jivanta wanted to find a secluded place where they could rest and think of a plan. I'm just going to say they didn't know where to go for help. Because if you're going to sit down and think of a plan, that's where you're going to figure out what to do next. If I were in that situation. Okay, hydrate. For those of you that don't know me, I always try to drink water while I'm doing these narratives. And when I say hydrate, it means you're going to hear a pause because I'm drinking water. It was dark when they reached the third village, and they were hungry. So Varun had an idea that Jivanta normally would object to, but under the circumstances, she knew they had to find a way to survive. You got to remember, this is a mother and son here. So I'm thinking of this situation as if I were with my son, and, you know, the dynamics of a mother in her 40s with a son in his 20s. And what would happen if you were out there? So I try to make this feel as realistic as possible so people can delve into the emotions of the characters. Continuing on, right here. So they stole some fish from a drying rack and untied a small boat from the shore. They sat inside the boat while Varun used his ability to create a sphere of water around them and submerge themselves out of sight. They rode for miles like this under the surface of the river. Varun was able to maintain a safe air pocket for them underwater while passing through unseen. Jivanta brought her tattooed sparrow to life and let it fly high above them to see what lay ahead. Whatever it saw, she could see. She quickly realized that they were not in Italy, and the land mass was not a country that she could recognize. The great river Main followed west from the forests of Tamia into the ocean, so most parts of the river were at least 2 miles wide. From the sky, Jivanta's sparrow could see numerous army encampments along both shores. Okay, so just a little Easter egg or teaser, or I don't know what you want to call it, like some information that you wouldn't normally get. Um, Jivanta's ability is that she can bring images to life. So she has tattoos on her body, 3 snakes on her back, uh, a sword on each leg, and a sparrow on her just by her belly button. And when she brings the sparrow to life or the snakes to life, because they are images or drawings or paintings or whatever, then the sparrow has a unique ability to let her see what it sees. Oh my god, it looks like Lord of the Rings out there. So when I wrote her character, I did write it intentionally to sound like she has an Indian accent. Um, it's not offensive to anybody, it's just the way I try to make them sound. She had told Varun at one point, for the most part, Varun understood that they were in a dangerous situation, but the Tolkien fan in him was dying to be able to see what she saw. He thought it would be so cool to be able to ride an armored horse and wield a sword. He just didn't want to fight any orcs. He didn't like the orcs. Varun let the watery sphere dribble away and brought the small boat back to the surface. He urged the flow of the water to help push the boat ashore. If you haven't figured it out yet, Varun has the ability to manipulate water. And in earlier sections, I wrote where he discovered he burnt his hand, and when he ran it under cold water, it healed him. So now he also has the ability, in the heightening of the situation, as they get closer to appearing in Catal, these people's abilities started taking on more advanced abilities. And one of them was that Varun would be able to heal himself by using water. Continuing on, when they stopped, flow of water to help push the boat ashore. When they stepped out of the boat, they heard a sparrow's song from behind them. Jivanta held her hand out so it could land on her palm. After the sparrow landed, it melted into her skin, and its black outline appeared on her stomach again. It flew through the forest and didn't see anyone. We might be safe for tonight, but I'll have it take another look in the morning. It's too dark to see now, Jivanta said in a low voice. No orcs? Varun asked with mild humor. Jivanta didn't smile. She knew Varun was taking this whole situation better than she was. She had always assumed that someone from the government would find out about their abilities and come kidnap one of them or both of them. But she never expected them to disappear in the middle of movie night and fall into a beach of some strange land. She remembered the moment she saw, I don't know if this is part of, I think this is part of that paragraph. I always get nervous when I see a period at the end of the one page, and then it starts with a capitalized word on the next. But I think this is all the same paragraph, grammarly. She remembered the moment she saw Varun start to fade out of the corner of her eye. She jumped to grab him, but her hand clutched at an empty space. He was in the middle of laughing. She'll never forget the sound of his laughter echoing before he completely disappeared. She dropped her popcorn bowl and screamed his name twice. When she began to feel a floating sensation. Moments later, the room went black, and the next thing she remembered was landing on the sand next to Varun. She wasn't glad of their current situation, but she had to admit to herself that she was glad that Varun was here with her instead of being alone. Or worse, watching him disappear and not knowing where he went. Hydrate. Okay. Varun pulled the boat up the shore and flipped it upside down at the tree line. He had a burlap sack filled with the fish they'd taken and a water pouch to drink from. Making fresh water was easy for Varun, and every chance he had, he would pull fresh water from the river and funnel it into the pouch. He was able to filter out all the sediment and debris so that it was cleaner than bottled water. Maybe we should sleep under the boat to protect us from animals, he asked. Do you think so? What if people come along? Jivanta peered into the darkness of the forests. I think we can protect ourselves with what we have, Mom. It's not like we'd have to hide our gifts here. These people have probably seen dragons and unicorns. Maybe it's warmer under there too. Varun didn't want to admit it to Jivanta, but he was terrified about going into the dark woods. He was hoping she would opt to stay on the shores. Okay, we rest here tonight. Come get some rest. I think tomorrow we need to figure out where we are and how to get home. Jivanta's coping mechanism was planning. As long as she knew what she would needed to do next, she could remain calm. Varun lifted one side of the boat and watched Jivanta crawl under it. Then he ducked under it as well. You have to remember, I think this section that I wrote here has not been checked by Grammarly. So some of these periods and commas are not appearing where I want them to be. So I'll edit it later. But for now, here we go. Jivanta was certain that she would lay awake all night while her mind turned, but she was asleep within minutes of laying her head back on the soft grass. Okay, so I didn't make a separate file for this because I'm just continuing the flow of the situation. I didn't want to break away. If I break away to like another location, I just start writing on a different document. But here we are. Hold on, hydrate. Okay, I'm going to do one check over here, see if anybody's there watching. And I don't see anybody, and we're at 16 minutes, so let's keep moving because I want to keep these at half an hour each. Early the next morning, Jivanta and Varun were awakened by a startled yelp. Their eyes snapped open and they sat bolt upright. Varun looked around frantically, but Jivanta was already looking at the young girl who made the noise. The three of them watched each other with wide eyes until Varun broke the silence. "What happened to the boat?" he asked when he noticed it was nowhere in sight. He thought for a moment that the young girl had dragged the boat off, but she was petite like his mother. She would have woken them while trying to lift it. "Boat is in pocket," the girl said, her voice trembling. Jivanta saw her gripping a stone in her hand like she was ready to throw it at them. "Boat is what? Is that some sort of code?" Varun asked. Jivanta turned to him and shot him an admonishing glare. She turned back to the girl and held her hand out in a surrendering gesture. "Please, we are not here to hurt anyone." Jivanta used a soothing tone that she learned from years of nursing. "We are lost, and my son and I just want to go home safely." An expression of understanding came over the girl's face, and she took several anxious breaths. Varun knew that his mother handled troubled people on a daily basis, so he kept silent and allowed her to do the talking. Jivanta could see the girl's distress and felt sorry for her. While keeping eye contact with the shaking teen, she slowly got to her feet and seemed to reach out with both her hands. Or did she reach out? She reached out with both her hands. Okay. This is why I like to read it. Okay. Keeping eye contact with the shaking teen, she slowly got to her feet and reached out with both her hands. "Are you lost too, dear? I see that you are wearing modern clothing like us. We have seen the strange clothing people here. Wear, and you're not one of them, are you?" Okay, that's got to change. We have seen the strange clothing people wear. "We have seen the strange clothing people wear, and you're not one of them, are you? Look, my son is wearing a hoodie. Look at my shoes. The people around here do not wear running shoes like this." That needs a comma. I don't know, I'll let Grammarly get it. "Are you lost too? Did you appear here like we did?" The girl watched Jivanta point at the shoes. Her eyes scanned over Varun when he stood up, and she saw the unmistakable jeans and Vans shoes that were very familiar to her. She began to notice familiar things on Jivanta, like her hair was clipped with a plastic tooth comb and the purple sweater with the University of Washington logo on it. Go Huskies! She began taking deep breaths until tears filled her eyes. Her body began to shake uncontrollably, and Jivanta couldn't help but step closer to hug her. The young girl dropped the rock and began sobbing when Jivanta embraced her. It's going to be okay. Shh. We'll figure this out, okay? Jivanta held the girl for a long time. Varun slowly stepped away and let his mother speak to her. You're not going to say the girl. How many times are we going to say speak to her alone? Okay. It took us almost 10 minutes for the girl to calm down. Calmed down. Past tense. It took almost 10 minutes for the girl to calm down. Jivanta let her go, but kept looking her over head to toe. Because Jivanta was a nurse, she observed dark circles around the girl's eyes. Her lips were colorless and chapped, and it made Jivanta wonder how long the girl had been alone in the woods. I'm going to take a bow. I am Jivanta Anand, and this is my son Varun. Jivanta gave her a comforting smile. Her sweet Hindu accent was warm and kind. What is your name, sweetheart? The girl looked at Jivanta and took a slow, measured breaths, and when she steadied herself to speak, her accent was thick. I don't know how many times I got to describe this girl's breathing, but I'm going to leave it for now. I am Gray Arvidley. Her small voice was hoarse. I am from Brno, Czechia. You are from India, yes? The girl asked, and Jivanta's smile widened. Yes, honey, but we are Americans. Varun here, he was born in Seattle. How old are you? Jivanta plucked a twig from the girl's hair and smoothed out the strands. I am 16 years old, Gray answered. Jivanta's motherly heart dropped. Are you here with anyone else? Jivanta asked, and Gray shook her head. How long has it been since you've eaten? Jivanta asked. Gray's eyes widened when she mentioned food. I killed a rabbit 3 days ago and tried to cook it. Gray shrugged, but making fire not easy. Okay. Jivanta looked at Gray's hands. Her nails were crusted with dirt. Have you been sleeping outside in this weather the whole time? Some days, yes, answered Gray. I found abandoned village and slept, but there nobody there and no food. Only people I find were men. They tried to kill me, so I tried to get out of woods. Gray began to cry again. I just want to go home. Jivanta put her arm around Gray and looked at Varun. Looked at Varun. What was I thinking? Look at Varun. Give her some of the fish. Let's all have something to eat first. Then we'll figure out what to do next, Jivanta said to him. Varun nodded and a thought crossed his mind. Hey, Mom, if I gather some wood, do you think you could draw a fire in the sand and make it come to life? Varun asked. Jivanta shot a startled glance at Gray and hesitated. Gray saw that Jivanta worried about what Varun said. The teen had abandoned all attempts to hide her abilities in the last few days for the sake of survival. Now Gray was at the point where she forgot to use caution. She hadn't exposed her ability yet, but she could clearly recognize the apprehension of someone who was trying to hide it. Gray knew she heard Varun clearly, and even though it was a strange phrase, no different than telling him that the boat was in her pocket, she immediately understood that Jivanta had an ability to bring something to life and that they needed wood to burn. No bother, I will make wood, Gray said with a weak grin. Varun raised his eyebrows in interest while Jivanta's eyes widened. Gray picked up several twigs out of the grass and piled them in a 5-inch stack in the sand. Varun's expression slowly turned to a patronizing smile, and he shook his head. We're going to need a little more wood than that. He stepped forward with the bag of fish and pulled out 2 large fish wrapped in cloths. With the bag. I'm just going to say with the bag because he pulls out 2 large fish wrapped in cloth. Uh, am not finished, Gray shot back before she touched the twigs. Jivanta and Varun jumped when the twigs grew into logs stacked in a large pile. Their audible surprise made them both laugh in spite of themselves, and it made Gray smile too. It reminded her of their boat, so she reached in her pocket and pulled out a 1-inch boat, then held it out to Varun. I believe boat is yours? She asked. I did not know you were under boat. I shrunk it to move it to water. I shrunk it to move into water so I cross river. I was surprised to find you under boat. Varun was still laughing when he took the boat from Gray and looked at it closer. That's awesome! His compliment made Gray giggle. Mom, look! He handed the boat to Jivanta, who grinned in awe as she turned it over in her hands. She looked at Gray and picked up a small stick. Would you like to see what I can do? Jivanta asked with a smile. Can you cook fish? Gray was feeling better already. The anticipation of food made her happy, but Jivanta's kindness and Varun's silly demeanor brought her out of her doleful state. Even better, Jivanta replied, and drew a wavy lines in the sand that took the shape of flames. She held her hand over the drawing and swooped her fingers forward like she was casting a spell. Flames burst forth from the motion of her hand and engulfed the logs that Gray had created. Gray laughed gleefully and held her hands over the flames. It's real. I can feel warm, Gray said as she rubbed her hands together. Varun unwrapped the fish. He found a flat rock nearby and lay it on the fire. Then he lay the fish on it to catch the heat. After getting Gray some fresh water, they all ate heartily. Jivanta asked Gray about her gifts, and they all exchanged stories and examples of what they'd been able to do. They also talked about the changes they had experienced lately. Gray vented about the terrible experience with the man who could disappear and how killing them had affected her deeply. Jivanta comforted her, and Varun made her laugh when he talked about the night he discovered his healing with water. Have you killed anyone with this magic that you have? Gray asked Jivanta and Varun. No way. In fact, just the other day, Mom and I saved one of those guys from drowning, Varun answered matter-of-factly. I don't know about the term factually. I know it's matter-of-factly. Okay, we're just going to leave it. He looked at Jivanta to agree, and he noticed her eyes were downcast. He looked at Jivanta to agree. He looked at Jivanta for agreement. But noticed her eyes were downcast. I mean, right, Mom? He asked with a little uncertainty. Jivanta looked up quickly and smiled. Yes, Varun, but you saved that man, not me, she said. Gray was able to see that Jivanta was hiding something, but she didn't push the matter. Even though she was only 16, living on the streets made her wise about some things, and she was able to read people well. She could tell that there was more to Jivanta as a person, but as a mother, she was protecting Varun from some things. She was protecting Varun from something. As a result, Varun was somewhat naive. He seemed oblivious to the look Jivanta had when he talked about saving the soldier, and his innocence was charming. So Gray did not want to drag Jivanta into an uncomfortable situation. Were you heading into forest? Because I go that way to get away from forest. Gray pointed east toward the great river Main. Well, we were trying to get someplace safe. There's a bunch of armies lined all along the shores, on both sides, and all the way to the ocean, Varun answered. But it sounds like there are armies in the woods, too. Yes, Gray nodded, then she frowned. You say there is ocean? Maybe we are in different continent, like Australia. Because these men in woods, they have strange creature with them. I read once Australian has Australia has very strange creatures like no other country. I don't think so. The people we ran into didn't sound Australian, Jivanta said. It doesn't matter where we are lost. And no matter what direction we travel, we don't even know where we're going. We have no clue who to go to for help. I remember, Gray muttered, when bad men found me in woods, he kept asking where savages were. And he asked me if I was in Ghost Army. Gray shrugged and looked at Jivanta. Do you know what this means, Ghost Army? Jivanta and Varun exchanged a confused glance and nodded. Gray continued. He also said he was soldier of King Orin. I cannot remember, but something in the woods nearby snapped and everyone went silent. Gray's breathing quickened and she let out a small whimper before Jivanta reached over and took a strong hold of her hand. Varun looked around wildly while he scooted near Jivanta. All of them watched the woods fearfully. Another sound made them jump, and a man stepped out of the tree line and onto the river shore about 30 feet away. He looked up at the sunlight happily and smiled to himself. He looked around and froze when he saw the three of them a distance away. Hydrate. Jivanta readied herself. She released her grip on Gray's hand and held her hands out to her sides. Under her sweater, something slithered around her back and over her shoulders. Mom, hold on. He's smiling at us, Varun whispered. Jivanta squinted in the late morning sunlight and saw the man wave at them. The bulges under her sweater melted away and Gray leaned forward with interest. Her breathing calmed. I don't know why I'm fixated on writing about this little girl's breathing all the time, but whatever. Breathing calm. The man turned to them and started walking their way. He continued to smile with gleaming teeth, and his handsome face looked around as if searching for anyone else. Hello, mis amigos. A beautiful day to be out, and the man slowed his pace and looked over Jivanta and the two youths with surprise. My, such a colorful array of attire. Are you entertainers? He asked kindly. Jivanta was still wary. She looked over his battle-ready garb and sword, but it was his endearing smile that made her leery about this man. We are lost, but we are trying to stay safe from those armies out there, Jivanta called to him. As the man neared, he no longer seemed apprehensive. Varun grinned at the man as he helped himself to a seat by the fire pit. The stranger seemed oblivious to Jivanta's cautious stare. Yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know what you mean. The hordes have been raiding the borderland villages. Horrible tragedy what happened to that farm village in Idanjaro. So many people killed. He sighed while shaking his head. He looked across the three faces and saw their confusion. His smile dimmed a little until a thought hit him. Oh no, where are my manners? The man leaned forward and put his hand out. I am a Mimica. So pleased to meet you. I am a Mimica. I am called a Mimica. I am called a Mimica. So pleased to meet you. He smiled brightly again. After a hesitant second, Jivanta was the first to offer her handshake. Then Varun took his hand, but Gray huddled close to Jivanta and only nodded at him. So what brings you to the Tamian forest? You all do not look like savages, he laughed. Jivanta and the youths looked at each other with wide eyes. They didn't say anything out loud, but they were all hoping to ask this man more questions. Jivanta looked to the man again and cleared her throat. Like I said, we are lost. We are not from here, and we are trying to find safety. This young girl was attacked by men in the woods and nearly escaped with her life. The men in the woods were looking for savages too. Jivanta was uncomfortable using such a discriminating word, but she didn't know what the people were officially called. The men who attacked her were soldiers of King Orin. Jivanta struggled to sound like she knew what she was saying, but the more she spoke with her Hindu accent, the wider Amimica's grin grew. Amimica smiled at her for several seconds and then chuckled. Lina Senora, you have no idea what you're talking about, do you? He finally asked. Oh, no, sorry. My name is not Linda. I am Jivanta, and this is my son Varun, and our friend Gray. Gray smiled at being called a friend and gave Mimica a small wave. But you are right. We don't know anyone here. Like I said, we are lost, Jivanta explained. Mimica laughed aloud and slapped his knee. Jivanta wondered what was so amusing. Gray leaned over and touched Jivanta's shoulder to whisper in her ear. I think Linda Senora means beautiful lady. Ah, you can speak Portuguese, the man beamed at Gray. Ano, which means yes. I learned little bit in school, Gray said with her thick accent. Well, I have good news. The Queen of Vermora has sent me out to find people who appeared here from the Earthern realm, Mimica said honestly. She is a powerful enchantress, so perhaps she knows how to send you home. He ended with the lie. He could see a spark of hope light up in their eyes, but Jivanta held his stare with suspicion. Why did you call it Earthen Realm? Jivanta asked. What does that even mean? Where are we? And Jivanta pointed to the sword mounted across his back. You said your name, but you never said what you do. Why did some queen send you out to find people like us? What does she want with us? I can see this is a lot for you right now, but I tell you the truth that the queen asked me to find people like you. You three are not the only ones who have recently appeared, and the queen really wants to figure out why you are here. Now it was Mimica's turn to speak with sympathy. That sentence sounds, but I tell you the truth that the queen asked me to find people like you. We said that already. Name, what did some queen? The queen sent me out to appear from. Okay. But I tell you the truth that the queen asked me to find you. Find you. You three are not the only ones who have recently appeared, and the queen really wants to figure out. There's really stuff. The queen wants to figure out why you are here. Now it was Mimica's turn to speak with sympathy. It's weird. Okay. So we are still rolling. Oh my God, we're at 38 minutes and we still got a long way to go. Okay, we're going to try to wrap this up because I don't like to go more than 30. Okay. Jivanta slowly looked up at him. Her mind calculated every word carefully. Why did you appear here? Why did you appear here? Mimica looked into Jivanta's eyes. This woman was very perceptive, and she knew what kind of questions to ask. But his job was not to explain their purpose. His job was not to explain their purpose. Nobody explained it to him when he fulfilled his role years ago. He pushed himself up off the sandy beach and stretched his back. I want to take this out. His job was not to explain. Why did you appear here? Hold on. But I tell you the truth, guys. I think that's the wrong question that I would ask if I were a person. Why did you appear here? What does she want with us? I think is going to be, because he never answered that question. But he said, I can see a lot. Find you, you three are not. She wants to figure out why you are here. So, what would be my first question if that was said to me? I can see it's a lot for you. Uh, So, this is not Earth. So, wait, what does that even mean? Where are we? What is this place? I guess is the only thing he didn't. Woman. Okay, so that part might not be because she's not asking anything trivial. Um, Hermione, she asked adamantly because at this point I'd be losing my patience. Okay. This woman was very precise. She knew what kind of questions his job was not to explain. The only part of what I want to keep about this is the part where he seems relaxed because he does not care. He pushed himself off and I can only say that you need to rally with the other people who appeared here like you. The queen wants to help you do this. Once, but he doesn't answer her question. Okay. I don't want to say I can only say. You are in a country called Catal. I'm debating on whether I should say you were brought here because I don't want him to lead on that he knows more than he does. Because he does know, he knows a lot more, but we don't want to reveal that right now. So you are in a country called Catal. Country called Catal. We're going to start a new sentence with that because here's a next idea. You need to rally with with other people who appeared here like you. Not with other people who appeared here like you. The queen, I don't like you just sounds weird. You need to rally with other people who appeared here. The queen wants to help you do this. Once you find the others, the reason for your appearance will unveil itself. Okay, hydrate. That was kind of a rough one. He looked back at Jivanta and smiled. So, are you coming? Or would you rather remain here and pretend like you know what you're doing? I feel like I missed a part. Oh, there we go. He pushed himself on. The queen wants to help you do this. Once you find the others, the reason for your appearance will unveil itself. A Mimica turned to look across the river south. It's not my place to tell you these things, Sonata. He looked back at Jivanta and smiled. So, are you coming? Or would you rather remain here and pretend like you know what you're doing? Varun and Gray watched as Jivanta slowly stood up. I think we would rather take our chances and find the queen ourselves, Jivanta announced. Ah, but it's dangerous out there, Amimika said. He stood on the other side of the fire from Jivanta and motioned toward the land across the river. Once you get across, how will you protect these two lovely youths? He then tilted his head mockingly and spoke in a high pitched voice. Oh, by your little self. We're capable of taking care of ourselves. While Jivanta said this, she signaled Varun with a side glance. He and Gray got to their feet as well. Varun knew his mother was warning him that she sensed a threat, and he stepped in front of Gray to protect her. Gray immediately felt the uneasiness as she pushed herself up off the beach. She secretly grasped the stone and hid it in the palm of her hand. Amimika threw his head back and let out a boisterous laugh. He casually reached back and drew one of his swords. One of his swords? He only has one sword. Drew his sword. Please, he continued to chuckle. Let's not fight in front of the children. You can leave us now. We'll be fine, Jivanta growled. But I cannot, Sonora, not yet. Amimika twirled the sword a couple of times and paced around the fire. Small bulges began to move under Jivanta's sweater. Varun heard Gray's breathing go shallow, so he reached back and grasped her hand. You see, Mimica wagged his finger at Jivanta. I know that you must have some kind of magic that makes you different than other people in the earthen realm. That is why you are here. He stopped pacing and stood in a fighting stance with his sword held forward. I just want to know what you can do. Leave us alone or you will find out the hard way. Jivanta held her arms out and two thick vipers slithered out from the cuff of her sleeves. Mimica's eyes widened, but to Jivanta's surprise, he was not afraid. The look on his face seemed like excitement rather than fear. I love a woman who bites. Mimica winked. Let's see what you can do, he muttered, then lunged at Jivanta and arced his sword toward her arm. Okay. I think I need to hydrate. Yeah, hydrate. Okay. Jivanta sidestepped while one of the vipers reared away from the blade. It snapped forward and bit Mimica's arm. He yelped in pain and stumbled forward. Varun and Gray scrambled backwards to keep away from the man. Jivanta kept her eyes on Mimica. She watched him drop his sword and clutch his wounded arm. He grunted and groaned several times, then he became motionless. His face was hidden while he bent forward and continued to cradle his arm. An uncomfortable silence took over. Jivanta stole a glance toward Varun, who made eye contact with her. He gave a slight shrug, then looked back at Mimica. You need to hurry up and get medical attention for that bite. It can kill you in less than an hour, Jivanta said calmly. She motioned for Varun and Gray to step toward the shore. Get the boat ready. We're leaving. Varun nodded and turned toward the shore, but he froze when they all heard a strange sound. Mimica was still bent over, hiding his arm in his face, when he began laughing. It started quietly at first, then he slowly raised his head and stood straight. His white teeth gleamed and his laughter escalated until his mouth gaped open and he bellowed happily. Mom, I think we should go, Varun whispered, but Jivanta wouldn't take her eyes off of Mimica. Varun, get the boat in the water and get Gray in it now, Jivanta replied without looking at him. He was about to protest when Gray pulled at his sleeve. He turned to see her holding a tiny boat out. Come, she said quietly and pulled Varun toward the water's edge. Mimica's laughter slowed, then he took a deep breath. Jivanta watched him reach his injured arm out and displayed the two puncture wounds. The holes from the viper's fangs melted away and turned into dark ink under his skin. Then it grew until it looked like a viper tattooed on his arm. Tell me, Lina Sonora. Mimica's words were seductive. How do I bring it to life? Do I just think it? As soon as he said it, the viper on his arm sprang out of his skin and hissed. It was twice the size of Jivanta's, but she still had two against his one. It all came together in Jivanta's mind. How could she be so foolish? The man was called a mimic for a reason, and he was not helping them to get to the queen. He was not helping them get to the queen because he was a nice guy. Mimica was stepped forward and picked up his sword with his free hand. He held his viper out toward Jivanta. His viper watched her vipers with contempt, and he smiled at Jivanta. After a moment, Mimica shot forward. His viper was like a spear thrown at Jivanta's neck, but one of her vipers sideswiped it, and her viper sunk its teeth into the side of his. Mimica's viper curled its head around and bit into Jivanta's snake. Both animals disconnected from the people and fell to the ground. Mom! Varun shouted in a panic. Jivanta thrust her empty hand out to him in a stopping motion, but she didn't look at him. I'm okay, Jivanta shouted in alarm. Whatever you do, do not use your ability on him. He'll be able to use it on you. Both of you, get into the boat now. she warned. A Mimica mocked a sound like disappointment while smiling. He watched with delight as Gray ran to the water's edge. She touched the toy-sized boat and it expanded. "Oh, come now, mother. You are not teaching the children to share?" He shook his head. "Pity, I would have loved to use that trick." Jivanta saw that a Mimica's viper was quickly winning the struggle with her serpent, so she let loose her second viper. It quickly slithered toward the other two and wrapped its mouth around the large viper's neck. A Mimica leveled his sword toward Jivanta and stepped forward. "Now it's just you and me," he muttered. Jivanta's mind raced. She didn't dare pull out her cobra to fight him and risk empowering him with a giant cobra. Jivanta hunched forward and pressed the palm of her hands to the top of each thigh. Curved swords lifted through her jeans and into each hand. The tulwars glinted in the sunlight. Jivanta spun them once and to reacquaint herself with the weight of her weapons. Hydrate. I don't know if it's my tongue getting dry or if it's my words, but I kind of stumbled on that last one. Curved swords lifted through her jeans and into each hand. The tulwars glinted in the sunlight. I wanted to say more there, but I think I'm going to leave it. Jivanta spun them once to reacquaint herself with the weight of her weapons. A Mimica watched her carefully and worked his empty hand. Jivanta watched him curiously but kept her guard up. "How come I cannot cremate more? What is the trick here?" He asked her with a mild sarcasm. He knew she wouldn't tell him what he needed to know. Jivanta realized that a Mimica could only make the viper appear when it bit him, but he didn't know that she brought it to life from the tattoos on her body. And since the snakes and swords were hidden under her clothes, he assumed she was making things appear from thin air, out of thin air, from thin air. As long as he was ignorant to her true ability, she still had the advantage under her clothes. Varun helped Gray into the boat, and the two of them watched. No, that can't be right, because it turned into a tattoo. Jivanta realized Varun can only make it when it bit him. But he didn't realize he didn't seem to realize that her viper had transferred a tattoo that came to life. Transferred a tattoo. Perhaps he didn't make the connection of the tattoo becoming a live snake. As long as he was ignorant to her true ability, she still had the advantage. Varun helped Gray into the boat, and the two of them watched a Mimica charge Jivanta, and duel. Jivanta, and they dueled. Jivanta dodged his assault gracefully. Okay, so I'm not reading silently, I'm just thinking. So as long as he was ignorant to her true ability, she still had the advantage. So I had to make this sound like okay, cuz what I wrote in earlier was when the snake bit him, the tattoo appeared, then it came to life. And he even said it like, what do I have to do here? Make it come to life. And then it came to life. But now he was perhaps thinking that there could be more, but he doesn't know the trick. And the trick is that it had to be an image, a tattoo that comes to life. Okay, so Varun helped Gray into the boat, and the two of them watched a Mimica charge Jivanta, and they dueled. Jivanta dodged his assault gracefully, but he was clearly stronger and better skilled at sword fighting. Fear seized Varun for the safety of his mother when it became apparent that she was barely able to fend a Mimica off with all she had. He spread his fingers, and Gray saw the water beneath his feet swirl. Her eyes widened, and she snatched at his elbow. Use water to move boat away from shore, then sweep her toward us. Remember, if you use water on him, he can use on us. Gray whispered fiercely, and Varun nodded. He jumped into the boat, and the water carried the boat out with purpose until it stopped. I have a thing for 30 feet. I don't know why. I'm going to say 50. 50 feet away from the dry land. On the shore, a Mimica had knocked one of Jivanta's swords out of her hand, and she was backing away as fast as she could to avoid his attacks. His long legs gained momentum, and he closed the distance between them. He swiped at Jivanta with an arc, and her second sword clashed roughly against his heavy blade. Jivanta's small hand couldn't hold her second sword any longer, and she dropped it in the sand. Hydrate. Breathing heavily, she gripped her injured wrist and glared at Mimica defiantly. Behind him, Jivanta saw that his viper was devouring the last piece of the second snake she released. A strange thought came to her mind, and she huffed with humor. What a waste of money for those tattoos, she thought to herself. A Mimica turned to follow her stare and looked over his shoulder. He smiled triumphantly at the sight of his viper slithering back toward him. The sound of rushing water startled him. He turned back to see Jivanta gone. The sound of rushing water startled him, and he turned back to see that Jivanta was gone. That Jivanta was gone. He snapped his head to look out at the river and saw the water carrying Jivanta toward the boat. It cradled her like a child until it reached the boat, then it lifted her gently and lowered her inside before it receded back into the flow of the river. A Mimica watched the boat sink below the surface and disappear below the currents. Sink below the surface and disappear. Sink and disappear below the currents. He sheathed his sword and let out a deep sigh. After several moments, he noticed that the viper had not come to him, so he looked back and saw that it was gone as well. A Mimica walked back to the sandy area where the serpents fought and looked around at the forest edge. He wondered if perhaps the animal slid into the woods to digest its food. But this was new magic. It could have just disappeared after it had served its purpose. But a Mimica figured he would work on making it appear again later. For now, he tried to decide if pursuing the young boy and girl was worth risking another fight so close to King Oron's territory, or if he should try to find the outsider that appeared at the farms. Let's see what the farm boy can do, a Mimica muttered to himself. Then he walked along the shore away from the dying fireplace. If he had looked closer at the ground around him, he would have seen the shape of a large viper etched into the sand. Into the sand. And that is it. Okay. definitely some changes there. Definitely needs Grammarly check. And I do like the flow a lot better than the first version of the story. First version of the story had him telling them his kind of like his backstory, which I don't want to tell right now. But I am at 59 minutes. That is 1 hour. That is way longer than I had intended. But the good thing is that means that I did a lot of writing, and 1 hour it is. We are going to end. Thanks for listening. We'll do it again sometime soon.